Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Boys. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I'm going to start off with the Black Noir stuff, because that was really fascinating when we find out the truth. I love how they hid that so well in episode 3, and it makes sense. Because Grace did see Soldier Boy doing his thing, and then the explosion happened, she got knocked out. We thought she was probably down for maybe a couple seconds. I mean, maybe other people probably thought, no, she was probably out not that long. But when we saw Black Noir, I was under the assumption, I think the point was to make you think his face is jacked up like that because of the explosion. And in fact, it was Soldier Boy. All of them tried to go after Soldier Boy. That's why, like, the TNT twins are kind of jacked up and stuff. And yeah, that's so fascinating. Because that also explains a lot of stuff too. What kind of gives us a little more introspective about Black Noir situation. Why he kind of has almost like this childlike element to him. Because obviously he goes to this like almost like basically essentially the Chuck E. Cheese equivalent. And he's seeing all these animated characters, which the Beaver character is one he drew. Which, side note, the voice actor for that person is, I guess, I was reading his bio as one of the successors to Mel Blanc, but he might be, maybe he's not, maybe he's also like, maybe he's the only one, but he voices at least Bugs and Daffy. He's like the current voice for them. I was like, oh, that's fascinating, because when you listen to his voice, I'm like, I could definitely hear a little Bugs Bunny in the voice that he's doing for the Beaver, but obviously he's adding a little bit of a stutter on it, but all these like animated creatures are around because this is kind of his safe space. But like the point I was making is you could see him previous, at least I think you've seen him drawing stuff before, but at least I want to say it was like a previous episode this season. Might have even been episode 4. I think you saw Noir like over by himself drawing that beaver. So I think because of the damage he suffered because of Soldier Boy's attack, it ended up damaging his brain, which might have something to do with why he doesn't talk, but why he's also caught up in all of this as well is because it takes him back to, like, his brain's kind of maybe stuck in a childlike state. So, like, maybe he's only, like, a couple years old. Yes, he has all his memories, but maybe he had, like, the mental capacity of a child to some extent because of the trauma that that his brain ended up suffering. So, but I love it. It's surrounded by all these animated characters. You're like, what? And at first you're like, oh, this is weird and trippy. And then it gets super depressing when they basically start reenacting his trauma about, you know, once again, now why we understand why Payback hated Soldier Boy. He basically beat on all of them. He abused them, and now we know why Crimson Council's like, oh, we all hated you, especially Soldier Boy, because he was trying to, Black Noir, because he was actually going to try out for Beverly Hills Cop, but Soldier Boy was like, oh no, like, you're trying to be me, you're never going to be a good actor, oh, you're supposed to be funny to play that role, and you're not funny, and then proceeded to beat the ever-living crap out of him. And like that entire team lived in fear to him. It's like, once again, the interesting parallels between him and Homelander, and we get into why those parallels exist, but we'll talk about that later. But holy crap, I thought it was interesting too, because this whole episode is about Black Noir dealing with his trauma. And I was like, that's wild. And now it's like, right, you have to face Soldier Boy, and it's like, well, could he be? I mean, because even back then it took all of them together to beat Soldier Boy. So is he going to join up with Butcher and them to take down Soldier Boy, or is he going to try to go on it at his own? Because like, he won't be able to. I mean, he got his ass handed to him by Soldier Boy back then. Once again, you had to have others help you, and you still, you know, kind of got rocked. So no, not just kind of, you severely got rocked. Out of anybody, he got it the worst. But part of me wonders, is that why like Mindstorm is a little like off his rocker a little bit? Is it because of, is it other contributing factors, or was it part of that fight that kind of sent him spiraling? Like maybe him getting inside of Soldier Boy's head kind of backlashed on him. We never really got to see, because that gave Crimson Countess the time to kind of end up knocking him out, right? But I don't know, because later on he's like, oh, I can't keep out the voices. It might be a thing of his powers like went a little too far, and now like he can't shut out the surrounding voices. Either way. So now Black Noir is back in action. He's going to face Soldier Boy. He has all the reason to kill Soldier Boy, because it's like kill or be killed. Because at this point in time, you know, jumping ahead a little bit, but Mindstorm's dead. He's the only member of Payback that's left. So it's up to him he's as the last surviving member and is someone who hates Soldier Boy probably just as much as like MM. I mean, not as let's not compare trauma, but he hates Soldier Boy is like at least as much as MM does. So I want to say it probably was a little easier to chew and at least take with it being the whole Soldier Boy thing being animated. I think that probably made it an easier pill to swallow, because we saw that live action, that definitely would have been super brutal seeing that live action wise. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of good that they animated that, because I think that's also the point, to kind of make it not as disturbing, because it's in the form of a cartoon, but it's still pretty brutal. But it's like, yeah, you probably wouldn't want to see that brutality live action. I mean, to be fair, they kind of make up for it with later on with Soldier Boy showing that same brutality on it, so it's like, yeah, it kind of balances itself out to some extent. So, it probably would, I think, if he had done that, if what he did to Noir, if we saw that live action, it would have put the Negan and Glenn and Abraham thing to shame. Because I feel like that's like, on that, like, head bashing, that's probably up there still as like, I mean, because like Alex, we saw the aftermath. I thought that was him punching, that was Homelander punching his face in, but it could have been his face getting lasered in. I don't know. I think because the latter one, the one at near with Soldier Boy later, it's like, well, the face was covered. Still doesn't take away from it, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So other than that, we had Kimiko and Frenchie showing up to where MM and Annie are, and they're willing to help out because news is going around about, like, right, they're calling, and then of course that'd be the narrative. It's like, oh, this is fake news. They're trying to, and then the guy, I mean, of course the guy would take Ashley's son, because obviously he's a Vought stooge, but also him and Ashley. So of course him going to be an opposite of her. But what does he create? What is narrative does he create? Oh, Starlight, the jilted lover, the woman scorned, hysteric. It's like, don't ever put the words hysteric and describe. You never use hysteria to describe a woman. That's also like, you're just like, I mean, that's the point. They're trying to use every term they can to like take away her credibility, but it's like, man, they went hard in the paint on that, and of course they would. And I even love later on when he's supposed to be like, hey, talking about the next president candidate, you have Victoria being like, you literally spent the last 20 minutes basically shitting on Starlight instead of actually bolstering and being there to represent the candidate that they're supposed to be voting for, because he doesn't care about the presidency. It makes him look bad. He's like, no, she's bad. He's trying to get the people who love him on his side. It's like, he needs that love. He needs to feel that admiration. Like, okay, you're still on my side, and I got to turn you against him, because anyone that might be on Starlight's side, I got to immediately make them love me. Everyone needs to love me, So, especially because he was worried last episode about everything falling apart because they found out about the truth about Soldier Boy. Now, because of Starlight's expose, and she won't stop. She keeps posting. She keeps going live. It's like, he's trying to damage cultural as best he can, but it's like he's failing on every front because he doesn't know how to handle damage control, because once again, you're not Stan Edgar, and you are stumbling your way through it. I love that he went to see Maeve, and so we find her in the facility, which is, and I think that's supposed to be the point. He locking her up like that, being a representation of, hey, I was locked up like this as a kid. I think he was almost trying to tell her, like, it's not as bad. And even she's like, why are you keeping me alive? He's like, right. It's like, God, I forgot how he phrased it, but basically he's like, I'm not choosing to let you live. I'm keeping you alive. There's a very important distinction there, because it's like, yeah, at one point in time, I thought about would have had kids with you. And he's like, yeah. And then she's like, no. And he's like, oh, don't be so crass and gross. I would never force myself on you. I'm like, then what the hell was the whole Becca thing? Like, do you not register that? Like, the fact is that, because the thing is, that was set up to be that, like, he, like, raped her, but I guess even in his mind, he's like, because he's still trying to shift the narrative of, like, no, like, she hooked up with me. It's like, no, it was out of fear, just like Maeve being with you was out of fear, because, like, no one can question you, no one can talk back to you, because you put them in line. And so, him saying, like, don't worry, I'm going to basically harvest your eggs, and it's like, yeah, That way, like, yeah, even if I kill you, or if he's like, oh, if you die or you kill yourself, basically I'm gonna have our children, and I'm like, that's so jacked up. Because it's like, yeah, us together will create a child even stronger than Ryan, because he's trying to replace a child he couldn't have, and he knows this is going to, like, it's his way to stick it to Maeve. It's like, right, because this was like his love in the past, and it's like in his twisted mind, it's like, oh, I'm almost carrying on the torch, but it's also me sticking a middle finger to you because I know how much you'll hate it. But then, like, for her, it's like, despite the situation I'm in, she's like, this is still one of my top 3 days, because for the first time ever, I've seen you scared. She was even like, wait, do you have concealer on? Or do you have a bruise? Because him getting his ass handed to him last episode, like, he once again ran away scared. He knew how close he was. He might not know that Soldier Boy was going to take away his powers necessarily, but he knew they were getting the upper hand on him. And once again, we saw it in the episode. He had that bruise on his face. He also said something interesting I didn't even think about last episode. When that blast went around the house, of course it seemed like it has to be a direct hit for you to lose your powers, but who knows, maybe all it has to do is be proximity based. And I love the description of what Homelander said. He was like, he literally burned the V out of their bodies. I was like, that's fascinating, because I never once thought about that. Like, oh, I would have never thought, it's like, oh, it's literally burning up the V in your body. That's so fascinating. I guess the V is just in constant circulation in your body, and he just blows it out of your DNA or just like your bloodstream or whatever, if you're lucky enough to survive it. But it's like, yeah, that makes me wonder, like, do you even need a direct hit? Probably like close enough proximity. Maybe not, because it didn't stop Butcher, even though he was in close enough proximity. So it probably anyone, you had to gotten hit direct, like probably within a very small radius, or you probably did get hit by it. Because that's what I'm wondering about Love Sausage, because he walked out and his dick was he was charred, his dick was charred. So the question is, like, because this thing is kind of like extendo dick, right? Which is a weird way to say that, but you know. So I'm curious, is his dick stuck like that because he can't, make it, like, he can no longer, like, control it independently like that? So was that supposed to be representing, like, he lost his power? Like, if you're not dead at that party, a lot of those suits walked away with no powers. So that's really, really fascinating and kind of really, because I did even cross my mind to think that anyone that survived probably walked away with no powers. Oh boy, we'll talk about any other elements to our episode, but when she was in Vought, getting the OG Compound V, and Homelander caught her, I was like, oh, like, what's he gonna do? And she's like, no, I'm just packing up my stuff and leaving. And he's like, well, and I love that he's like, what you're gonna do out there, you're gonna go out there and you're gonna apologize about, it's like, whether it's like the Zoloft got the best of you, or yada yada yada, like all the stuff that you're on, you're gonna apologize to Vought, but mainly you're gonna apologize to me. And once again, that comes first and foremost, because his image is what matters the most. But then she's just kind of like saying no, and he's like, I love him threatening Huey, being like, oh, you know what I made that promise to you? She's like, and she starts listing off everything about the Soldier Boy situation. She's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to find Soldier Boy and find Maeve, and we're just going to kind of end this. And also saying that what you did to Supersonic, I was like, okay, where's this going? And he's just like, yeah, you know what happened to Huey. And I figured she'd be like, go ahead, good luck with that, because Huey, Soldier Boy, and Butcher kind of handed your ass to you last episode, so I'm not too concerned. But I figured she'd pretend like she doesn't care about you, when in actuality she still does. We'll kind of get to that later, but. And then she's like, okay, thanks for saying that to my 190 million followers, which I'm wondering is that supposed to be like, just kind of interesting to think about, because her following was 194 million or so, like 393 or 94 million last episode. So it makes me wonder, because of this whole her versus Vought thing, maybe just kind of an interesting commentary of either people stopped following her because they didn't want to get caught up in like the politics of it. Like, it's like, I don't want to be in the middle of this, or people unfollowed her just because they don't believe her. Like I said, I'm getting caught up in it, but I think that's an interesting thing. It's like, it's 3 million out of like 190 million, but still, like, she was, I think I remember her being 193 last episode. So yeah, I think that's kind of just an interesting little detail that I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. I just thought that was interesting. And her going live is like, yeah. She's like, oh yeah, you said, oh, he's like, what? Starring like, you're not supposed to record us when we're running lines, and he looks so pissed. It's like, okay, because she knew, like, right, if I'm not careful, this SOB will kill me. But for her, it's like, I'm not afraid of you anymore. Like, I saw back at that HeroGasm, like, how powerless you were. Like, I saw you for what you really... No, it's like, I think she was specifically saying when you killed Supersonic, I saw the real you. When you're feeling scared and threatened and backed into a corner. So there's that. So that's super nice. What was immediately going through my mind, no spoilers for something else, but I'm like, I think this is kind of true to life, but secret recordings end up being a lot of people's undoing. Let's just say there was something I watched recently where that came up. I was like, ooh, secret recordings. That's so good. But nevertheless, so there's that. But connecting Annie's story to Frenchie, MM, and Kimiko, what ends up happening is, and I like that moment between Annie and Kimiko, and they're drinking, and she's asking Kimiko, is like, oh yeah, when's your first drink? She's like, this one, and it's like, because I was like, that's a huge bottle, and like Annie's knocking it back. It's like, yeah, when you grow up in Iowa, it's like there's nothing else to do but drink. But Kimiko wants her to get the compound V, and he's like, no, you're free from it. Plus, we have no idea. Yeah, it worked on you before, but we have no idea what's going to happen now because the situation, we know you can inject someone, obviously, who hasn't, what regular compound V can do to someone, because we haven't seen Victoria's daughter, but we can assume Zoe's okay, and granted, we just have no idea what her power is, but... it's like, I think it's a little different where it's like Kimiko had it in her body, it got burned away. I guess the compound V is specifically tied to something maybe in your genetic makeup maybe it's kind of, once again, like how I treat it as kind of like misfits. Your powers are kind of determined by your personality. Like what you might visualize and what kind of like, Huey is kind of like the whole, like, a part of his personality is he's like the scaredy one. So like having the power to teleport. Butcher's the one that's kind of filled with rage. So superhuman strength being an unstoppable machine of death and destruction. So having a lot of power, and how would he visualize that? Having the same powers as Homelander to some extent. So I think that to him is like the true representation of power. So I think it's kind of a Misfits thing. Like, I'm sure other things have done it, but Misfits is the thing I typically associate it with the most of. Your powers potentially represented by your personality. And so maybe on Kimiko's, maybe Kimiko was afraid of death just because of everything that happened with her mom and dad and, the situation her and her brother were in, but why her powers manifested the way they did. But she ended up giving Annie, like, a message on her phone being like, in case you said no to me, I would want you to read this. So... And her and Frenchie, she's like, yeah, let's just dance. And she's like, for the first time, I'm able to feel your arms because with my superhuman strength, it always felt like your arms were bendy arms, but now I can feel them for real this time. And as they're dancing, she tells him, like, she wants to feel them at least one last time and talks about wanting to take compound V again. But for him, it's like, no, this is all you want. You want to be free. We can run away to Marseille like we wanted to. But for her, it's like, no. She, for the first time, she needs her powers because she almost lost Frenchie and saying all that and gets him to read the message she has shown Annie to convince her. She nearly lost Frenchie and she can't let that happen again because she says that, like, the kiss freaked her out a little bit, but it's like, not that it was a bad thing. It's because they are so much more than that. He is her family now, and she would do whatever it takes to protect her family. Her saying that compound V isn't good or bad. It comes down to how you use it, and she wants to use her for good. She wants to protect her family. So Frenchie he doesn't like it because she's finally free, but co-signs it. And so later on, Annie brings the compound V and he injects it in her and she's superpowered again. And I guess for once, Frenchie's almost feeling a little bit of that, like, right, I wish I could have protected you from this, that you didn't have to worry about saving me. So I think there's a neat parallel between Frenchie and Kimiko versus Huey and Starlight. Not just where they are, but just the interesting parallels of, like, right, Kimiko wants her power so she can protect Frenchie. Huey wanted to, it's also because he feels powerful for the first time in his life, but he's also trying to justify it by being like, it's just for Annie. But it's like, no, it's his own self-indulgent. Self-indulgence. It's like a big reasoning for the powers and such, right? So that's how things kind of work out on that front. Oh God. Right, Frenchie were trying to find out what they could use against Soldier Boy. Turns out was using the wrong thing. Frenchie, because it makes sense, because Frenchie is the one who typically ends up being the one that comes up with their means of killing Soups. They haven't had to use that in a while, because like Transparent's the only time that's really fully come up to my recollection. In the past 3 seasons, I think that's the only time that's really come up. But I mean, like, Frenchie's like the one who kind of puts stuff together. I'm sure there's more recent examples I'm just not thinking of. I know like the Transparent thing was like the biggest example of it. I'm sure there's been more recent examples I'm just not thinking of at the top of my head. But Frenchie figures out it's a Russian nerve gas, but they're not going to be able to get any because unless they take another trip to Russia, which, I mean, I'm sure that's going to be playing right into Nina's head because that gives her probably enough. Well, for one, you just got out of that country after all the shit that went down, then that'd be harder getting back in. Plus, Nina would probably use that to her advantage if she finds out she's still out there. So be careful about that. goes to see Janine and Todd because he finds out that Todd took her to that parade, and then immediately like confronts him, which even MM's ex is like, whoa, you took her without telling me? He's like, yeah. It's like, yeah, but I think they're dating. They're not, I don't know if they're married, but I think they're probably just dating. Because it hasn't been that long. Well, you never know. Like, she could have gotten remarried in that time. But I think it's like, she most likely, her and Todd are just dating. So it's like, no, this is still my daughter. Like, you don't get to kind of take her wherever without permission. That's why I'm like, you know who MM is. You know what his stuff is. So why are you so, I guess, like, she knows what his deal is. It just does seem like you know how bothered MM is by it. But I guess like she lets a lot of the superhero stuff go because it's Janine. But like the way Todd leans into it, you would think like you know how scumbaggish superheroes can be. Because you know MM's thing isn't just out of like, I'm just angry. Like, you know the truth behind his circumstances. So you know he's not crazy about, like, you know that he's not just some crazy person. It's like there's legitimate reasons behind, like, his hate for superheroes. So that's what I think is interesting. But MM's like, right, you can't take my daughter around. Like, Homelander's full of crap. This is about Soldier Boy. But Todd, he's believing all the BS. It's like, yeah, here you are believing the mainstream media. They're lying to you. And you're like, ooh. Which, yes, the mainstream media isn't always the greatest, and yeah, there might be ulterior motives, but it's like MM's telling you first, and he's like, no, and he's like, like he's a bigger liar than Starlight. The fact is, she's trafficking children, Janine's, and it's like he has the best of intentions, but that's always the thing of when you get swept up in that hysteria. Because there was that guy last season at that store. He saw that guy's eyes. He's like, "You're a soup." He was listening to that rhetoric and once again, real life, like when you listen over and over again to the way people talk, their rhetoric, the analogies that they use and make, and then they talk in such a hateful manner, like eventually, like almost like a doom scrolling type of thing, like it will weigh on your subconscious until like that just kind of consumes you like it did, and he ended up shooting that guy at the store. So it's a very similar thing, because I'm scared. I'm like, Todd seemed like he going down a slippery slope. And so it's like, right, MM's like, you want to put your life in danger? That's fine. Keep my daughter out of it because you're not her father. He's like, well, someone has to be. So MM laid him out. One single punch. And so, like, but the thing is, he did it in front of his daughter, and he feels bad, So it's going to be interesting to see how that ultimately ends up playing out. Some other elements to the episode is Ashley going to visit A-Train, and they're creating a narrative of like, oh my god, it's sad what happened to Blue Hulk, that Soldier Boy killed him, and it's like, and A-Train's going along, he's like, yeah, and I love her being like, yeah, it's like, yeah, you guys were like reconciling and everything was fine, huh? And it's like, yeah, so now like they ended up giving him Blue Hulk's heart, so it's like, yeah, he can run now. Like, you have to go through physical therapy, but it's like you'll be running again in no time, and we'll kind of, the training and A-Train or something like that is going to be the name of this. It's going to be a gritty biopic. And what was it she was saying? It was like, yeah, you're going to bleed it straight street gangbanger who's sailing that yayo. I'm like, dude, Ashley, because I love, what was it? Can I get a what? I was like, oh, Ashley, I love you so much. And then she's going on about like how like right in this movie like we'll make the person that's your coach or whatever Tom Hanks, and it's like, but he was like, no, that was my brother was my coach. It's for the movie. I'm like, there's so many meta levels to that, because it's like, right, that's kind of any like it's not the same, but it's in that same vein as like $1 Million Baby type of thing. I think you could also make the argument, it almost feels a little white savior-ish if you want to cast Tom Hanks in that. I think the time is just interesting because he was in like Elvis and stuff like that. Granted, it's not the same, but you know, it wouldn't be him playing the same role. But the fact is, you would get Tom Hanks because Tom Hanks is kind of like, it's funny because they like, you had Soulja Boy literally last episode saying like, oh, Bill Cosby's America's dad. I kind of feel like at one point in time Bill Cosby was, but I think he's Hollywood's dad. Like, people like, it's like, oh, it's Tom Hanks. And then the whole joke about like no one gave a shit about COVID until Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson got COVID. Then it's like, oh my God, this is real. That's the joke, right? So it almost feels like he's kind of America's sweetheart dad or something like that. That's how I chalk that up to. I know there was that recent thing where he kind of blew up at fans because I kind of trampled over his wife. I haven't watched it, but I'm like, yeah, he blows up at some people. It's like, you kind of knocked over my wife. You were kind of assholes about it. It's like, yeah, I can understand blowing up at them. Because everyone has their thought of like who Tom Hanks is. Regardless, we're not going down that whole tangent. But obviously A-Train is not okay with it. Ashley's like, oh, we okay? Okay, and just kind of leaves. But now, like, after everything that went down, I mean, I want, it's cool, like, hey, I get to run again, but it's like, there's still the thing of your brother's going to be paralyzed for the rest of his life. Two, it's like, you had the heart of the guy that you murdered, and, you know, it's like, oh, and also it adds to, right, this is another guy I murdered and got away with it, so there's that. But also, it's like, I think he's not as sucked into the vault machine as he used to be, because I think last episode was a rude awakening for him on so many levels, especially after that conversation with Huey and the punch from Huey. I think A-Train's not going to be I think he's finally on his path towards redemption. Maybe not, but I think he's potentially heading in that right direction. So there's that. Then there's the whole situation with the Deep. Him and his wife, things aren't kind of really going great, and he's like, oh, let's kind of well, because he's getting on, was it Hannity? And it's like, oh, she's got the speech right. He's like, no, I'll figure it out. And she's almost like, and he's like, I got us this far. And she's like, what? You got us this far? He's like, yeah, relax. We need to spice up our relationship. I got just a person in mind, and brings out the octopus from last episode. And she's kind of not okay with it. But then it's like, she at least tried for his sake. And it's just weird. And it's like, oh, I'm not going to have sex with a fish. It's like, well, for one, she's a mollusk. You know? And it's like, well, how long have you been fucking it behind my back? It is a she. Get your pronouns right. So they're kind of going split, and the Deep is like, don't worry. Like, he's like, oh, I'm be fine on my own without you constantly like breathing down my neck. And it's like, oh, and this is when you have your rude awakening, because you think you can make it on your own, but you're an idiot. You have to follow someone else's script, because if you go off script, yeah, it's going to blow up in your face. Oh, you're going to eat so much dog shit in that episode. Whatever he does, he's going to eat so much dog shit, and I cannot wait. I can't wait, because it's like, yeah, like, he's the lovable, like, not lovable idiot. He's the piece of shit idiot that you're kind of like, ah. Well, once again, people always have to be like, yeah, it is interesting where his story has been like, oh, season 1, garbage piece of shit. Season 2, it's like, oh, it's kind of funny. And season 3, oh, he's an idiot. But it's still like, you always have to remember, I mean, to be fair, it's every superhero. But him in particular is like, you are a garbage human being. So it's going to be interesting. It's time for him to kind of like fall and just kind of disappear into like obscurity. Is going to be interesting. But some interesting things we learned about Soulja Boy, at least based on what the legend said, is that basically everything that Soulja Boy is a complete myth. It's like, oh, D-Day, he showed up on Normandy Beach 2 weeks after it was over. So it's like, yeah, everything was simply a photo op. Yeah, he's this soldier and powerful person, but he was always just there. Either that's by Vaught's decision, whether that's just his own. So he makes himself seem like, oh, I'm this well-hardened soldier, but it's like, no, it was always, I was just some dickweed of, you know, just, it's once again just the polar opposite of Steve Rogers as Captain America, where he's like, nah, I'm gonna get out there. I want to get out there. I don't want to just be the the photo op. I don't just want to be the one putting on the shows, the propaganda. I want to be out there. I want to do something for my country. And it's so interesting because last episode he was like, what did I do? I fought for my country, and what did I get for it? Nothing. But it sounds like everything he did was complete and utter rubbish. There is no this legacy of his is, I mean, to be fair, what is Vought known for? It is known for spinning a story and creating mini narratives. So it makes sense that they would do the same thing for their biggest legend, Soldier Boy. And I love that his thing is older ladies, because he's like, yeah, he's like, he needs some lube, they're great, and it's fantastic, but, you know, they're super dry as he put it. I was like, okay. And I love that Butcher's constantly keeping him high, because it's like, yeah, the guy's got PTSD. He was like, what? He's got PTSD? Yeah. It's like, after everything, it's like, I need to keep him mellowed out. So I was like, cool, we're dealing with a psychopath who's got PTSD. And he's self-medicating. And I love that you had Butcher being like, yeah, what was it? He was saying, like, basically, someone with issues self-medicating, like, I forgot what the exact wording was he said, but then he immediately hands the syringe to Huey. I'm like, are you saying that because you recognize the hypocrisy? Or what's the point to be like, oh, look at him saying this, neither him nor Huey recognizing the hypocrisy as they proceed to self-medicate. So I don't know. But Mindstorm's thing is to trap you in your own nightmares, and lo and behold, he does that to Butcher, and we get a lot of insight into him. We learned a little bit about his upbringing last season when we met his dad, and kind of found out a little bit more about the Lenny situation. But now we get to see it, and it's horrendous. The fact is that, you know, and Butcher took the beatings. Like, when his dad was going to find Lenny in the closet, he coughed so that his dad would find him, let it all out against Butcher, and then he'd leave Lenny alone. And he'd done that probably most of, if not all of their life. And we see Butcher now he's having this self-realization of everything I've ever done, all this deep-seated anger in me. And what did Grace say? Like, oh, she took it back, being in episode 3, being like, you are just like your father. Everything he's done, anytime he's lost himself in his rage, it's just him lashing out on people the way his father did. I mean, that's what this comes down to. That's why once again, Becca said back in season 2, you going off on people you are always a ticking time bomb. It was just a matter of time. Homelander ends up being like your main focus, but even if Homelander's going, you're going to find some excuse to blow off at someone else because it's so ingrained in him. There's so much trauma there that he's lashing out at people, like that deep-seated anger. It's been in him since he was a child because he suffered his father's abuse. And then when he was at school, it's like, oh, he's selling the Louise. Like, oh, we're going to have to tell your father about this, which is like, for Billy, it's like, don't do that because he knows what his dad's going to do to him. But then the teacher's like, yeah, we don't want you to end up like him. And for Billy, it's like, don't even compare me to him. And what does he do when he's beating the crap out of the guy with like the stapler? He's saying the exact same thing his father said to him when his father was beating him. And to the point, he got so caught up in his rage that he ended up backhanding Lenny when Lenny tried to stop him. And then what did it cut to? Last season when he punched Huey, you know? And it's like, once again, like, he's now seeing the parallels between Huey. He's always seen the parallels between Huey and Lenny. That definitely got brought up last season, and they're definitely leaning into that this season. I mean, especially in this episode. And so his dad's even congratulating him. He's like, oh yeah, some people in this world need to be slapped. And he's kind of giving son a beer, like, and that's the sad thing. His dad's like, oh, I'm so proud of you, son. And he's telling Lenny, it's like, oh, you kind of got to, almost like, basically, you need to man up. I think it's basically, essentially, of like, he's like, oh, you don't have to be so puff or something. I'm assuming that's probably like an even cruder way of saying, like, you don't have to be such a pussy. I think it's probably an even cruder way of saying that. But understanding, you know, and for Billy, it's like him regretting everything. You know, him leaning down, trying to talk to his brother. It's like, please, don't listen to anything he has to say. And then seeing over when his Billy finally left. Billy's like, right, I got to go to the barracks. Like, I got to get out of here. Like, if I leave, maybe he'll, like, I'm the real issue. Once I leave, he'll probably, like, lessen up on you. And Billy's like, no, don't listen. Stay, you idiot. Because he knows, like, right, you just got tired of your dad's abuse. That's the sad thing, because I think Butcher now recognizes it as, to be fair, you were a teenager. You only know what you know now. At the time, you were just done. Like, your dad done nothing but abuse you and your brother, and you tried to get out. And in retrospect, you wish you had taken your brother, or maybe at the very least you would have stayed because he needed you. But he yelled at his brother like, right, I've been protecting you your whole life. It's basically time for you to grow up, and just left. And 6 months later, his brother took the gun in the house and killed himself. And for Billy, he's like, yeah, I couldn't get out of the barracks, but it's like, you shouldn't have left in the first place. But once again, it's like, he was a kid that was getting abused himself. He just wanted to get away. You know, whether he realized it at the time or not, Billy was trying to save himself. But it's like, in a traumatic, trauma-filled, abusive situation like that, he got out. Like, because maybe he did convince himself that, you know, I might be saving myself, but yeah, he tried to justify it. I'm like, no, like, once I leave, Dad won't hurt you anymore. But it's like, no, he went on beating me every day after you left. That probably made his dad even, once again, Billy always took the beatings for his brother. He protected his brother, and him taking all those beatings, it's not like Lenny still didn't probably get any, but Butcher helped lessen those. But now now Lenny was getting everything, because at least it probably split between both of them, and Billy leaving probably just set his father off even more, so he probably hit even harder and even more. We don't know what his mom's situation was, because we know his mom was being abused by their father as well, I think, is what he was talking about last season, if I remember correctly. So he was an abuser all around, because we saw his mom sitting at the kitchen table not really doing anything, so she might have been someone that was abused as well, so that's why she just kind of sat on the sidelines. And now it's finally, for the first time, Billy's recognizing, just once again, everything he's done up to this point in time, he's just done what, he's become his father, you know? And even Lenny, you know, in his head calling him out, it's like, right, everyone that could help you stop becoming the monster that you are is like, you know, but, you know, everyone that you end up dragging them along and they end up dead, death always comes for them. It's like, whether it's me, whether it's Becca, and now you're leading Huey, like, eventually being around you dragging him down so far will kill him, because anyone that could try and bring you back, and then there'll be no one to hold you back. There's almost like, on some psychological level, it's like, right, you drag down the people that can pull you back. You know, and now it's like Huey was your canary. What is he? He's not even your canary anymore. He's in the coal mines down there with you, just as lost in the dark. So all the while that's happening, you have Soldier Boy and Huey off together. And obviously, Soldier Boy's calling Huey out for like, oh, like, what is he? Basically, like, oh my God, like, how hard and good did Butcher suck your dick? It's like, well, he saved my life, but Soldier Boy's almost like all that feely, touchy pussy shit is kind of how Soldier Boy's going about it. But then Huey calls him out. It's like, you're no real, yeah, you're acting all tough. And then Soldier Boy smacked him. He's like, I warned you. And it's like, now we're also seeing a little bit of like how he kept people in line. So all the while that's happening, they end up coming across a priest and a nun, and because the entire time Soldier Boy kept going, what'd you say to me? He's like, I literally said nothing. You are so high right now, you're hearing shit, you're paranoid. And then it's like, right, he comes across this nun and this priest who are, their car's messed up and they're trying to go somewhere, and this Soldier Boy headshots the priest, and it's like, oh my God, Huey's like, please don't kill them, this is all in your head. But then lo and behold, it turns out, no, Mindstorm did get to them. And just afterwards, Huey's like praying, like, "Oh my God, we just killed a nun and a priest, going straight to hell." But when the time comes, Huey makes a choice on his own to save Mindstorm, because by saving Mindstorm, he can save Butcher. Because Soldier Boy's all about, like, oh, like, you know, you got to carry on, like, blah, 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 blah. But he sees that all, like, the tough guy act. He's like, it's complete and utter BS. And even Mindstorm was like, I don't want to save this guy. I was inside of his head. He's an asshole too. It's like, yeah, but... And Huey's saying the line, he's family. So he ends up waking up Butcher. But before they could go off, Mindstorm got it hard. And so, once again, he confronts Mindstorm. He's like, okay, trying to get answers. He's like, it wasn't my idea. I was like, yeah, it was Noir's. But Noir wouldn't do anything without Vought. Why would they co-sign it? And he heard something, and then, like... Yeah, Soldier will be like, That's impossible. And he proceeded to bash Mindstorm's brain in. Which I don't know if this... I mean, who knows how, like, filming and stuff like that. But interesting parallel. Like, whether they did that intentionally or unintentionally. Him bashing... I was about to call him Megamind. Mindstorm's head in with the shield like that. Can't help but think of Falcon and the Winter Soldier a little bit. But obviously, even more brutal. So, that's what... that was interesting. But you could tell Butcher's really thinking about everything that he saw in that vision. Because even asking Soldier was like, what did they tell you? And I'm like, what did they tell him? And now we find out later on what it was. It turns out good old Soldier Boy is Papa Homelander. I was like, that's interesting. Interesting. He's like, yeah, I don't know, like... Vagabond made that choice back then. He's like, I would have shared the spotlight, but basically he rubbed one out and they took his semen and they made Homelander. So now it's like, oh, Soldier Boy, this is about to get bad because Soldier Boy will not kill Homelander now. It's like, cool, you've got not only Soldier Boy to deal with, but also Homelander. So now you screwed yourself because now you've got two superpowered psychopaths now working together. They're going to kill you. Soldier Boy's probably going to lead them into a trap and then help Homelander kill them. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to kill my kid anymore. Like, so for him, it's like, I would have shared the spotlight. What father wouldn't do that for his son? And, you know, what has Homelander's whole thing been about? Trying to, like, everyone he's ever tried to go after, whether it's Madeline, whether it's Ryan, whether it's Stormfront, he's always been looking for that love. Whether it's Maeve, whether it's him trying to force it upon, you know, Annie, he's looking for love. Now it's like, oh, my dad. Now, after everything he's been through, will he get sucked up into this and be like, you know what? I'm going to embrace you being my dad, or will he snap and be like, you know what, screw it? Will he pull a Klaus Michelson? Because if you don't know, Klaus had the chance to reunite with his father, was that season 2, I want to say, and because his dad kind of came back to life. And what did Klaus do? He thought it was all a manipulation, and he was just tired of the BS. And so what did he do? He killed his dad. So I could easily see Homelander being like, to cut out the human side of himself. It's like, right, the side of me that wants a mom, wants a dad, wants love. I'm going to kill that part of myself by killing my father. I could definitely see that whole element to it. I mean, he kind of already has a little bit of that Oedipus complex to him as well, so... I even love, like, after the whole thing at the, that thing for Bob Singer, that he ended up drinking the cow's milk, and Victoria caught him, and then it's like, right, she's like, I can help you, it'll be a transactional relationship. It's so interesting how she could stay so calm under pressure, because even she knows she can manipulate him, because it's like, right, you moved on from, Annie kind of went her own way last episode, you were hoping for a partnership, but now... Because at first I was wondering, because I forgot where I think the place is in New Mexico. Wasn't that the address, I believe? Because she handed him some address. She's like, I need you to do a small favor for me and I'll help you. And I'm like, what is it that she needs? I'm like, it can't be anything related to Stan, can it? Like, what could that be about? Because we still don't know where Stan is and what he's up to. But what could Victoria be having him do? What could this be about? Oh, once again, someone brought it up. I want to say it was Nerd Soup had brought it up about, like, once again, because they're the reason why the head popper from last season is so in my head right now. So I'm like, is there some correlation there? I'm like, no, like, who could she want him to take? Like, I don't think that, not unless that is Edgar's, like, address or something like that, but why would she go through that? She screwed over her dad, but I don't know if she wants him necessarily dead. I'm like, who could it be? I don't know who. I can't imagine off the top of my head. Maybe there's a clear answer. Maybe like maybe if you know the comics, you'd know who it is. Maybe because it's a storyline from the comics, or at least you can surmise based on some stuff. I don't know what to fully make of that. So that's going to be an interesting thing finding out that. But Annie made a big discovery when she was picking up the Compound V. She found out that the Temp V. We've been seeing last episode, and Huey found some goo out of his ear. This episode, it was in Butcher's ear. It turns out this thing causes, like, tumors. And it seems like every dose accelerates things. So basically, you're going to die. This untested thing is obviously going to kill you. So, and he's like, you got to tell Huey. And she's like, I'm going to call back every 5 minutes until you... But Butcher stops answering. And so Huey's like, so what are we going to do? He's like, right. You and me are gonna swing by the office, pick up some more V, and you and me we're going and Granny down there, we're gonna kill Soldier Boy. Which once again, that's not gonna happen now. But I mean, we're gonna kill Homelander because Soldier Boy's gonna help us do it. Which, like I said, that's not gonna happen now that Soldier Boy knows that he's Homelander's dad. Because didn't Soldier Boy also say he wanted to have kids with Countess? It's like, well, now he has kids, but it's like, right, Homelander's effed up relationship with his son, which also, that's going to be interesting too, because Soldier Boy will now learn, well, I have a son too, so he might try and come after Ryan, because it's like, oh, this is my grandson. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out, because that could be a whole can of issues. But other than that, Butcher didn't warn Huey. My thought is this. I think he's lying to Huey because he doesn't want to tell Huey the truth, because he knows like what the temp V is going to do. So most likely, either he's going to be like, right, despite everything, he can't let go of his anger, what's inside of him, despite his like deep soul searching deep dive he did this episode. He can't let it go. He can't let go of his anger, his revenge. My thinking is, when he gets Huey back to the office, what he did to MM, he's going to do to Huey. He's going to knock Huey out and be like, right, because I'm fine. Like, if I have to die, so be it. Because if I die, I no longer have to drag you and the rest of the boys into the middle of this. This is my vendetta. I don't need to drag you further down this path. This is how I'm going to save you. If I have to die taking this temp V, fine. That means I get to kill Homelander, but I also get to finally, like, rid the world of my existence. Because both me and Homelander need to go. So maybe it's like a kamikaze thing of trying to take him, Soldier Boy, and Homelander out. Probably will need to be that way, because you can't leave Soldier Boy unchecked. You kill Homelander, Soldier Boy's going to be an issue. You kill, you need both of them removed from the equation. We'll see how it plays out, because the next episode is in fact the season finale, and I'm so excited to see how they ultimately end up wrapping up this season. It's going to be wild. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.